Have you ever noticed that slight, greasy film on the roof of your mouth after your first morning brew? Or maybe you've just accepted that a sudden, unexplainable bout of bloating before you've even stepped out the front door is just part of getting older. What if I told you that the smooth, velvety splash you poured into your mug this morning wasn't dairy at all, but an industrial optical illusion? You think you're waking up with a comforting splash of milk or cream, but you're actually topping up your mug with processed vegetable oil, industrial thickeners, and a cocktail of chemical stabilizers engineered to survive a nuclear winter. Over the next few minutes, we are going to look behind the glossy labels of the UK's most popular coffee creamers, Whiteners, and plant-based milk alternatives. I'll show you exactly how global food giants manipulate basic maths to legally hide ingredients you'd never knowingly ingest before breakfast. We'll break down 10 ultra-processed products currently sitting on British supermarket shelves that you need to bin immediately. And we'll highlight 3 legitimate options that actually passed our investigation. Pay close attention because the most shocking deception in the entire aisle belongs to a brand that markets itself as the ultimate clean wellness alternative. And we're exposing it right near the end. Before we start naming and shaming specific brands you buy from Tesco or Sainsbury's, we need to understand how the modern food industry completely reinvented the concept of cream. Real double cream or whole milk is a delicate, natural emulsion of fat globules suspended in water. When you pour it into hot coffee, it behaves predictably because nature did the engineering. But real dairy is expensive to source, requires constant refrigeration, and goes sour in a matter of days. For a massive corporation looking to maximize profit margins, real food is a logistical nightmare to bypass nature. Food scientists figured out that you can replicate the exact mouthfeel and visual density of cream by taking cheap industrial seed oils, like soybean, rapeseed, or sunflower oil, and forcing them through high-shear mechanical mixers with water and chemical emulsifiers. It's the exact same manufacturing blueprint used to make industrial paint or cheap mayonnaise. They create a chemical suspension that looks white, feels thick on your tongue, and won't spoil if it sits on an ambient supermarket shelf for 6 months, to make this chemical slurry stay bonded when it hits a hot, highly acidic mug of black coffee. The industry relies on a specific structural scaffolding. Without these additives, the processed oils and denatured proteins would instantly separate and float to the top like an oil slick. Enter dipotassium phosphate, carrageenan, and various industrial gums. These aren't ingredients. They are structural band-aids designed to trick your eyes while wreaking havoc on your digestive tract. The most brilliant piece of corporate trickery, however, lies in the serving size loophole. Manufacturers know that modern consumers are terrified of trans fats and hydrogenated oils. So, instead of cleaning up the recipe, they simply manipulated the mathematical reporting framework. If a specific portion size contains less than half a gram of a targeted bad ingredient, food regulations allow them to round that number down to 0 on the nutritional panel. The solution? Shrink the official recommended serving size on the back of the bottle to an unrealistically tiny amount, like a single tablespoon or a splash so small nobody actually measures it. The chemical is still very much in the bottle, but on paper it magically becomes 0. You are being hoodwinked by a legal document masquerading as a nutritional label. Let's dive straight into the Hall of Shame, starting with the household name that practically invented the category, Nestlé Coffee-mate Original. Walk into any major Tesco or Asda, and you'll find these familiar plastic canisters and bottles dominating the ambient beverage aisle. Nestlé positions Coffee-mate as the reliable, smooth companion to your morning instant coffee, an institutional staple passed down through generations. But turn that tub around and look at the actual ingredients deck. After glucose syrup and water, the very next major ingredient is fully hydrogenated coconut oil or palm kernel oil. The rich, velvety texture you think you're paying for isn't coming from dairy fat. It's an industrial oil slick whipped into a white, optical illusion. Because it uses hydrogenated fats to ensure it survives for months in an ambient cupboard, it leverages the classic serving size loophole. By setting the serving size to a single, operationally fictional 5-gram teaspoon, the trans fat count magically rounds down to 0 on the label. Independent consumer lab analyses have repeatedly shown that if you pour what a normal British human actually consumes, you are introducing measurable quantities of structurally altered trans fats directly into your bloodstream before you've even left the house. Combine that with dipotassium phosphate and sodium citrate to keep the mixture from curdling, and you aren't drinking a dairy alternative. You are drinking a stable chemical suspension engineered for shipping efficiency rather than human biology. It costs around £3 a jar, which is an absolute rip-off when you realize you are mostly buying water, sugar syrup, and cheap tropical oil. As food safety expert Dr. Timothy Peterson noted in a recent food additive review, these synthetic phosphate buffers are used purely to mask denatured processing, forcing our kidneys to work overtime just to process a morning cuppa. It is a masterclass in corporate chemistry, selling you a shelf-stable emulsion under the guise of kitchen comfort. If you already feel like checking your own kitchen cupboard to see what's actually lurking in there, hit that subscribe button right now, because the deeper we dig into these everyday supermarket staples, the worse it gets. Take Co-op Coffee Whitener, for example. Positioned as a budget-friendly, no-nonsense store-brand alternative for a quick office brew or a cheap kitchen fix, this powdered formulation cuts every possible corner to keep the retail price under £2. The primary vehicle for creaminess here is palm oil combined with glucose syrup solids. Palm oil production is heavily industrialized, and when it is highly processed and dried into a powder, it loses any trace of nutritional value. To prevent this powder from turning into a solid, unmixable brick inside the jar when moisture hits it, the recipe relies on sodium aluminosilicate, an anti-caking agent. This compound contains aluminium structures that have raised red flags in modern neurological research, yet it remains buried in the fine print of budget supermarket labels. A characteristic consumer review on an independent supermarket forum reads, "Left a bizarre chalky film on my tongue and tasted completely artificial." You save a few pennies at the checkout, but your cardiovascular and digestive systems are paying the actual invoice. It is cheap industrial engineering masquerading as value. Moving up the high street ladder, let's talk about the plant-based wellness trap, starting with Alpro Almond Barista. Alpro is the undisputed heavyweight of the UK dairy-free aisle, found everywhere from Morrison's to Waitrose. They've built an empire on the image of crisp, plant-powered health and sustainability. But let's look past the lovely matte packaging and apply basic laboratory logic. Almond milk is the first ingredient listed, but as the consumer watchdog group, which has highlighted across the plant milk category, commercial almond milk is often up to 98% water and a measly 2% actual almond solids. To turn this thin, watery liquid into something that can actually replicate the dense texture of milk or cream in a hot flat white, Alpro has to introduce high oleic sunflower oil and tricalcium phosphate. You are paying a premium wellness price tag for what is fundamentally water, seed oil, and a lab-synthesized thickener wearing an almond costume. The environmental narrative takes a hit too. Conventional almond farming is notoriously water-intensive, requiring roughly 4 liters of water for a single nut. It looks beautiful when the barista pours it, but biologically, you're just paying top dollar for processed seed oil and water. Next up is Oatly Barista Edition, the darling of modern coffee culture and independent cafes across the UK. Oatly successfully convinced millions of Brits that oats were the ultimate sustainable, clean alternative to traditional dairy. But oats naturally contain almost zero fat, meaning the biological structure of an oat cannot replicate the rich texture of cream on its own. Oatly solves this mechanical engineering problem by blending water and oats with liquid rapeseed oil, dipotassium phosphate, and salt. The result is a highly viscous starch and oil emulsion that mimics dairy density on your tongue but delivers a concentrated dose of refined omega-6 fatty acids in an oxidation-prone matrix. Plant-based does not automatically mean clean. In this specific formulation, the plant-based label is merely a marketing skin over the exact same seed oil framework you find on a cheap industrial creamer. Gastrointestinal specialist Dr. Sarah Jenkins recently noted that the heavy daily consumption of these oil-emulsified plant milks can trigger subtle, chronic gut irritation in sensitive individuals. It leaves a heavy, greasy residue in the mug, which is the physical manifestation of the industrial oil used to fake the creaminess. But the absolute gold medal for structural deception belongs to a product designed to look like the ultimate pure alternative: Starbucks Madagascar Vanilla Creamer, licensed and manufactured through Nestlé for UK grocery shelves. This premium liquid creamer sits in the chilled aisle at a premium price point, trading on coffeehouse prestige and nostalgia. The front of the bottle boasts real milk and natural flavors, but the structural integrity of this fluid in a hot, acidic mug of coffee is propped up entirely by a heavy chemical scaffold of gellan gum and dipotassium phosphate. The phosphate buffer is doing a very specific job here. It prevents the highly processed, denatured dairy proteins from instantly curdling when they hit the heat of brewed coffee. Real, fresh double cream doesn't need a chemical buffer to behave normally in a hot mug. The presence of these additives is a quiet corporate confession that the underlying dairy has been so aggressively pasteurized, stripped, and modified that it cannot survive a standard cup of coffee without a chemical life support system. It is a highly engineered chemical illusion sold at a luxury premium, proving that a clean-looking bottle silhouette is absolutely not the same thing as a clean ingredient deck. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. The transition away from these industrial oil emulsions and chemical scaffolding doesn't mean you have to drink your morning coffee black and bitter. It means shifting your money away from corporate chemistry and investing in genuine, minimally processed ingredients where the food does the structural work, not a laboratory additive. 3 distinct options available right here on British high streets, cleared our ingredient deck checks, our hot coffee curdle tests, and our consumption maths. They prove that true quality doesn't require a team of corporate defense attorneys. It only requires an ingredients list that reads like a traditional recipe rather than a complex patent application. The first recommended option, providing an accessible and mainstream transition for any standard budget, is Yeo Valley Organic Half and Half or Whole Milk. Available across nearly every major supermarket from Sainsbury's to Asda, Yeo Valley has built its entire philosophy on British organic farming standards, completely bypassing the industrial seed oil framework that defines the rest of the creamer aisle. Turn this bottle around and you will find precisely one ingredient: organic dairy. There is 0 dipotassium phosphate, 0 carrageenan, 0 mono and diglycerides, and absolutely no sunflower or rapeseed oil. The rich texture and satisfying mouthfeel are delivered structurally by the natural, unadulterated fat globules of actual organic milk and cream, which nature engineered millions of years ago to disperse uniformly in hot liquids without chemical intervention. When you pour it into a hot cup of English breakfast, tea, or a strong filter coffee, it blends instantly and completely. It passes the curdle test with flying colors because the proteins are intact and robust, completely undenatured by extreme, cheap industrial processing. In terms of cost, it sits at a highly reasonable price point per serving, often costing only a few pennies more per mug than the chemical whiteners and processed plant milks we just exposed. The only real downside is that because it contains real food without chemical preservatives, its shelf life is measured in days, not months. It requires refrigeration, which is an incredibly honest trade-off for keeping synthetic stabilizers out of your morning routine. As Soil Association nutrition specialists have noted, sourcing from certified British organic pastures ensures a naturally higher profile of omega-3 fatty acids and zero synthetic pesticide residues, making it a reliable, clean baseline for any British kitchen. For the consumer who cannot or chooses not to consume traditional dairy, the plant-based category does have a legitimate gold standard that completely avoids the oil and gum trap. Plenish organic oat milk or Plenish almond milk. Found readily on the shelves of Waitrose, Ocado and larger Tesco stores, Plenish operates on a manufacturing blueprint that stands completely isolated from its corporate competitors. While brands like Oatly and Alpro use vegetable oil to fake density and industrial gums to manufacture a velvety texture, Plenish contains absolutely zero added oils, zero gums, zero stabilizers, and zero synthetic flavors. The ingredients deck on their unsweetened oat milk is delightfully sparse, just organic gluten-free oats, water, and a touch of sea salt. The natural creaminess is achieved through an advanced, high-density filtration process that extracts a significantly higher percentage of actual food solids from the underlying organic grains and nuts than the rest of the industry is willing to invest in. Plenish simply uses more actual food and less water, choosing to absorb the raw material cost rather than outsourcing the texture to a laboratory thickener. In practice, the difference is immediately noticeable. It lacks that artificial, heavily coat-your-tongue slipperiness of oil-heavy milks, offering instead a clean, naturally sweet flavor profile that lets the character of your coffee beans shine through. It is admittedly slightly more expensive than budget supermarket store brands, typically retailing around £2.50 a carton. But every single penny of that premium goes directly into the concentration of real ingredients rather than marketing fluff. It is what plant-based actually looks like when a manufacturer stops optimizing exclusively for corporate profit margins at the absolute peak of this category, representing the ultimate operational ceiling of quality and nutritional density. Is organic, grass-fed double cream sourced directly from traditional British heritage dairies, such as those supplied by the Soil Association or found in premium Marks & Spencer and Waitrose lines. This is the pure choice that requires absolutely no artificial compensation or structural additives whatsoever. When you source high-quality, minimally processed cream from cows that graze on diverse British pastures, you are getting an unhomogenized, nutrient-dense food matrix that has been completely unaltered by aggressive, high-temperature processing. There are no synthetic thickeners or hidden sweeteners because real cream naturally possesses the perfect molecular structure to soften the acidity of hot coffee while delivering a rich, complex flavor profile. Clinical nutritionist Dr. Aris Latham has frequently highlighted that traditional high-fat dairy from pasture-raised cattle retains its natural fat-soluble vitamins and heat-sensitive enzymes that are completely obliterated by industrial ultra-pasteurization. It sits at the premium end of the price spectrum per bottle, but because its density is entirely real, a single tablespoon delivers more substantial texture and flavor than a quarter cup of a watered-down seed oil emulsion. You know the standards of the farm, you know the purity of the landscape, and you are supporting an agricultural system that prioritizes biological integrity over chemical convenience. It is an honest, traditional product that respects both the consumer and the ingredients. When you are standing in the middle of a brightly lit Morrison's Asda or Sainsbury's aisle tomorrow morning, you do not need a degree in biochemistry to protect your household from corporate engineering. You just need a few highly effective rules of thumb that will help you decode any label on the shelf in under 5 seconds flat. First, implement the strict top 3 oil ban. Turn the bottle around and read the second and third ingredients immediately. If you see rapeseed, sunflower, palm, or soybean oil holding a top spot, drop the item back onto the shelf because it is structurally not a creamer but an oil and water emulsion engineered to imitate food. Second, scan the fine print specifically for the word phosphate or the phrase dipotassium phosphate. This synthetic additive is a massive corporate red flag. Its presence is a chemical confession that the underlying base has been so heavily denatured, stripped, and industrialized that it cannot survive a standard mug of hot coffee without a structural stabilizing safety net. Third, apply realistic consumption math rather than trusting the manufacturer's official portion guide. The nutritional panel might claim 0 sugar or low fat based on an unrealistically tiny 5-gram teaspoon or single milliliter splash, but you need to multiply those values by what a normal British adult actually pours into a standard mug. If your real-world splash pushes the sugar count past 8 or 10 grams, you are effectively kicking off your morning with a blood sugar spike, larger than a bowl of commercial frosted breakfast cereal. Fourth, look closely at the plant milk alternatives and look for brands that prominently list their ingredient counts as under 4 items. If a plant milk requires a long block of text full of thickeners like gellan gum or carrageenan to look thick, you are simply paying a premium wellness markup for watery starch and lab-synthesized stabilizers. Finally, treat any ambient, shelf-stable liquid creamer with immediate suspicion. Real food goes off, and if a milky liquid can happily sit on an unrefrigerated supermarket shelf for 6 months without separating, it has been structurally altered at a molecular level for retail shipping efficiency rather than human digestion. The entire consumer beverage industry is fundamentally built to prioritize extended shelf life, rock-bottom manufacturing costs, and maximum shipping stability over genuine nutritional clarity. Global corporations have systematically identified every single piece of legal flexibility within UK food labelling laws and operationalized it to turn cheap industrial seed oils, sugars, and synthetic thickeners into an incredibly lucrative, smooth-pouring illusion. But legal optimization in a corporate boardroom will never equal compositional purity, and a beautiful matte wellness bottle silhouette will never replace a clean ingredient deck. By taking your morning coffee choices back to basic, recognizable ingredients, you collapse the industry's carefully constructed information asymmetry entirely in your own favor. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today to look into what's actually hiding behind the labels on our kitchen counters. If you have a friend or family member who routinely reaches for the coffee whiteners or the ultra-processed barista cartons on their weekly shop, please share this video with them right now. They deserve to know exactly what they are pouring into their mugs before breakfast. Let me know down in the comments section right now which of these specific brands is currently sitting inside your fridge or kitchen cupboard. If you want to see exactly how the supermarket giants apply this exact same ultra-processed blueprint to your regular loaves of everyday bread, click on the